Hi, I'm Greg Olnick, and this is an interactive tour of SAP. So anything you see on the screen, you can click on it, and it will take you into a video talking about that topic. So you decide where you want to go. Like choose your own adventure. So anytime you want to go back, you just click the back button. That'll be on the screen. And anytime you want to go back to the main page, just click on the home button. It'll take you there. It's the status bar. So you have options in here to show what client you're in, system, what your username is, transaction you're in. So what that does is when you go to a screen like IH01, it'll show you that in the bottom right hand corner. So when you do a screenshot, screen capture, and send that to a help desk, they know what screen you're talking about. Response time is very useful. If you're having problems with speed, you're having problems with the transaction being really slow, you can activate this option here in the status bar. And when you run that, it'll track how long that transaction takes in milliseconds. So some of these are useful. I usually leave it on the transaction. This insert or override it's actually a button. So if you click it, it will toggle just like the same effect on the insert key has on your keyboard. So when you hit the insert key on your keyboard, it'll toggle between insert and override. You're better off to be in insert mode. In override mode, when you're like say in a notification description, as you type, it's going to delete text that's already there. If you want to be able to insert words in a sentence, you need to be in insert mode. This button here collapses the status bar. You can click it again to expand it again. This top button on top here, it basically gives you a menu where you can go and stop a transaction. If you're in a transaction that's searching and it's taking too long and you want to just quit and cancel it because you realize you made a mistake or whatever, you hit stop transaction, it'll kick you back to the main menu. New GUI basically will launch another session in SAP. You can have usually up to 6 SAP sessions running at the same time. I usually recommend for planners to always run 2, so if one crashes, you still have one that you can continue working with. This is the favorite menu. When you click and expand it, it shows the menu favorites, transactions that are usually within your role, and you can add favorites, delete favorites. You can go to favorites, upload to bring in a favorite file that someone has sent you. You can download your favorites to back them up. Usually it's save them on your desktop, on this PC desktop. So I'd call this Greg Faves on this PC desktop. And that way, if I have to have SAP reinstalled, I don't lose all my favorites. I'll have them on my computer. Usually I'd put them on the network drive so they're backed up as well. So if someone deleted all your favorites, if I went right click, delete all favorites, it's not a problem. Then I can go to favorites, upload, and bring my favorites. And if you have existing favorites, it'll ask if you want to append or insert where your cursor happened to be. Usually I append, so they go to the bottom of my current favorites. To delete a favorite or change a favorite, you right click and it gives you all the things you can do. Delete, change if you want to fix the description. You can insert folders also, like these folders, so organize your favorites. You can also insert transactions. The transaction would be a T code that you hear about, like say IH01, and it'll insert the transaction where you happen to have been. You can also insert other objects. That could be anything like a website, a link to a file. It could be a whole bunch of different objects that you can have in your menu. So if you choose web address or file, you simply then paste the path, give it a description, like say Greg website, and put in usually I paste the path. I know it off by heart. So that when someone clicks that, it launches that link. In this case, it'll be a link to a website. And to delete that, just right click, delete favorites. You can move favorites up and down with these little toggles here. You can also click and drag to move them. So you can drag that into a folder or just drag that to the top of the list. By putting it on the favorite folder, it goes to the very top. Actually, I'd want IH01 on the very top because that's my favorite. That's my favorite. So I'm going to collapse that again. The SAP menu, if you clicked on that, basically gives you all the transactions of SAP. You may not have authorization to go in them all. Where plant maintenance is under logistics, plant maintenance. One way to use the SAP menu is, especially if the favorites are underneath, I want to change where my favorites are. I want to be able to show the T codes. To go extra settings, I want to display, make sure you're displaying technical names. and I want my favorites at the bottom of the list. The reason why I prefer that, my favorites underneath, is then I can use the SAP menu when I need a T-code that I don't remember. I don't want to have to dig for it. Like for instance, say I'm planning and I'm on a user's computer and they don't have the planner favorites menu that I built. So I just go IP00 and it lists all the SAP menu, not favorites, but actual T-codes. If you type IW00, it has all the transactions that have to do with work management, notifications, work orders, even ones that don't start with IW, things like time confirmations. IW, if you're looking for parts, MM00 is everything about material masters. MB00, everything about material, good movement, and so on. It's a very useful technique to be able to get a cluster of transactions that you want to investigate. And to get back to the standard SAP menu, just click on the little blue button there, SAP menu. It'll take you back to the SAP menu. This button is a user menu. It just shows you all the transactions that you have access to. So it's usually not that useful if you're a super user because you just have so many. You're better off to have your favorites organized or use the SAP menu. So to go back to the SAP menu. This button is called the workplace. So it's kind of like an inbox. It's where all your emails will go, your workflow messages. It's all the different objects that have to do with your workplace. So in inbox, workflow messages that you have to deal with will be in there, like purchase recs that you need to approve and things like that, if you're using workflow. This is the delete a favorite. Like I mentioned, you can also just right-click delete. This is the change a favorite. Change the description of a favorite. I also mentioned you can right-click and choose change. This gives you all the options of what you can do with favorites. These are just to move your favorites up or down. If I click on a favorite, I click on the down triangle, it moves that favorite down, and this one will move the favorite back up. This is to hide the transaction code window. If you ever do that by accident, just click on the same triangle, will bring it back. This is just to refresh a screen. It's like hitting the enter key. This button is to customize your SAP. There's options, so you can choose a different theme. The theme that we're using here today is called the Enjoy theme. It's pretty standard. There's like Blue Crystal. There's different themes that you might prefer. But the training manuals and such, if they're all based on Enjoy theme, then you're better off to stay with the same theme. If you change your font settings and such, some reports that are custom built, whatever, they may not fit your screen very well. Some screens in SAP won't fit very well if you play with your font sizes. Interactive design, options for like visualization, customizations, notifications, control settings. My favorite is sound settings, to turn off that activate audio signal where you make a mistake or something or an error. It gives you a sound. It'll show you the error message or warning in the status bar, so you don't need the audio thing. I find it just annoying. Menu choice, you have the user menu, SAP menu, workplace, and refresh your screen. Favorites, add favorites, change, move, delete, insert folders, and so on. This is where I go to upload or download. Most of these other transactions you can do by right-clicking on the favorite. Extra, display documentation on a transaction that has documents connected. It'll show that documentation, technical details. Extra settings shows you settings such as display favorites at the bottom. It makes it easier to manage your SAP menu. And to display technical names. Do not display picture just as that the graphic that comes up. If you turn that off, then you will see that the logo, the water on your main screen. Do not display menu, only display favorites if you don't want to see the SAP menu. Extra, set start transaction allows you to set a T-code that will be your starting transaction. If you're always going to IHO1 every day, why not make that your start transaction? So that when you launch SAP, that's what you'll be in right away. System, you have some choices here. The most important one is user profile. Own data, or user data. The T-code for that is SU3. You see in the bottom right-hand corner. This is where your parameters are for your name, your title, and so on. The defaults that you want. Now, the problem sometimes people have is if the date format is not friendly for exporting to Excel, then you might need to change your date format. What printer you want? LOCL just means it's going to use your default Windows printer. If you have map printers, SAP map printers, then they'll be in your drop-down list. Leave that blank. It should list any map printers we have installed. Parameters we call PIDs, parameter IDs. Basically, these are variables that will fill some of the screens in SAP as their default preferences, like what company you work at, what is your planning profile, your default order type that you prefer when you're creating work orders, and so on. This is not the only place you can have default settings. This is just one place. And often I just have based on the role, I have an Excel spreadsheet of those PIDs, and I just copy and paste them into this grid. Color TV button, hard copy, basically dumps what's on your screen to the printer. Whatever you're looking at your screen, it's like a screen capture, but it goes right to your printer. Quick cut and paste, I would avoid that. If you activate that feature, I can tell if you're activated by the little check mark there. Example of this problem is IW38. When you're searching and you want to be able to copy something from one field to another, watch what happens when I highlight it. It doesn't stay highlighted, but what it did is it triggered a Control-C. So I'll prove it to you when I go to paste. You'll see that's what was in the clipboard. So that's what they call it, quick copy, because it copies as you select. But then it disables the ability of selecting its seams. You can still hold it down to delete. You have to hold down the mouse, and then you can delete. It's just an annoying feature. So I would recommend against it. But turn that off. This button is to create a new GUI window. Creates a new session. You can usually have up to 6 sessions. Now, if a session is busy searching, then that button is not going to work. So if you're in a session like IH01, and you accidentally, when you're looking at a structure and you accidentally hit expand whole, then that session's busy, you can't use that button. If it was a huge site and it was expanding the whole thing, it could take like an hour to expand. The best way is to launch another session, then the only way is the top left corner, new session. And the beauty of that, you can also stop that session. This button is to generate a shortcut. So if you're on a screen like IH01 and you want a shortcut to this screen on your desktop, and you click on this button, it defaults to that transaction IH01, what client, what's your username, and so on. So you can have shortcuts, and you can have the title be whatever you want. You can have it like a site structure, and then maybe mention IH01 in there just so you know and you'll remember it better. You change the size of the window, so I want it to always be maximized, and finish. So now I'll have an icon on my desktop. When I launch it, it will take me into that screen. So I have 2 ways of making a screen start directly. Is going to extra screen start transaction and creating a shortcut.